Let's cross to the editor of Spiked Online, Brendan O'Neill, who joins us again from London. Thanks for talking to us again, Brendan. You and I have often talked about issues as being, a split between the elites and the mainstream, I suppose, and even the coronavirus is split into that because it's the elites who can work from home are less affected than people who actually have to go out and visit premises, be at work, if you know what I mean. And this is playing out now as the argument continues in the UK over lockdowns. It's become an argument in part between the north of the country and the south.
Yeah, the lockdown situation in the UK is simply disastrous because what we have is we just keep going in and out of lockdown. There seems to be no end in sight to this process, and it's having an incredibly destructive impact on businesses, on jobs, on livelihoods, on people's mental health, in some cases on people's physical health. And I just think we need to get a grip on this situation and think of a different way for dealing with COVID-19. And as you say, there's a really important class differential in this. You know, lockdown is essentially a situation where middle-class people who can work from home, and everyone else carries on stocking supermarket shelves if they can, or losing their jobs if they work in the hospitality industry, or delivering food to these middle-class people who are at home. So it's causing great divisions in this country, and it's causing great hardship for a particular section of our community. And I think we've really got to rethink it.
Mate, the madness that this pandemic is generating in some forms of government is beyond words. As you know, in Victoria, they are still in lockdown and they're getting like one infection a day in a state of 6 million people.
It's crazy. And, you know, the cases and hospitalisations in the UK are rising. We had a really bad situation with COVID a few months ago, as did New York State and a few other densely populated parts of the world. Cases and hospitalisations are rising again, but they're rising far more slowly than they did in March and April. And they're petering off in some parts of the country. And there are some experts who say the pandemic is largely over, even if there is going to be little flashpoints like this every now and then. And yet we're still locking down. We still have the most authoritarian rules this country has ever had in peacetime. Civil liberties have been obliterated. Millions are losing their jobs. And we're heading for the worst recession in history. We really have to rethink this. It's a kind of craziness and it's got to stop.
Yeah, and thankfully mortality rates, despite those rising infections, mortality rates are going down. I want to go to another issue because one of your MPs there, a Conservative MP in the UK, has come to my attention. I wasn't aware of her work before, but let's have a look at some of what Kemi Badenock has had to say. She's a junior minister in the UK government for Equalities, and she's lined up Black Lives Matter, the organisation, for spreading propaganda around the place, particularly in UK schools.
It is a political movement, and what would be nice would be for members on the opposite side to condemn many of the actions that we see this political movement, instead of pretending that it is a completely wholesome anti-racist organisation. There is a lot of pernicious stuff that is being pushed, and we stand against that. We do not want to see teachers teaching their white pupils about white privilege and inherited racial guilt. And let me be clear, any school which teaches these elements of critical race theory as fact, or which promotes partisan political views such as defunding the police without offering a balanced treatment of opposing views, is breaking the law.
Brendan, that's a great calling out of political propaganda. Is the government there following through on this?
Well, I think Kemi Badenock was completely right to criticise Black Lives Matter in the way that she did. She made the point that, of course, Black Lives Matter, but the Black Lives Matter movement is a different question entirely. It's an ideological movement with some very regressive, dangerous ideas. And she really called out critical race theory in particular, and the teaching of critical race theory in British schools, which is this idea that all white people are privileged, all black people are victims, and we have to think about race all the time. The problem with critical race theory that is pushed by the woke left is that it rehabilitates racial thinking. It rehabilitates the racial imagination when we're supposed to judge people by their character rather than their colour. So it's an incredibly regressive, even quite racist theory that the left is pushing. And she says the government is completely and utterly against it. That's a very good sign. I'd like to hear more government ministers coming out and saying the same thing and backing her up, because I think she's making an incredibly important point.
Spot on. Let's duck up to the US and check in the last couple of weeks of the election campaign. campaign. We've heard all these allegations about Hunter Biden, this computer that allegedly is his old computer. It's now been handed to the FBI, and listen to what Donald Trump had to say about that today.
You know what it's called? You know what it's called? It's called the laptop from hell. The laptop from hell.
The laptop from hell. It's probably too early to judge. How much is this going to shake up the last couple of weeks of the campaign, do you think?
I think it would really shake it up. And laptop from hell is a great line from Trump. I'm not Trump's biggest fan, but that's a very good line, and I'm sure it will appeal to his base. It remains to be seen how much of this is correct, how much of this is accurate. It does seem like a few iffy things went on, but whether these emails are correct, we have to wait and see. But the most shocking thing, which you've just been speaking about with your previous guest, has been the response of social media giants to this story. They blocked the sharing of this story. They temporarily suspended the account of the White House press secretary. These are intolerable interventions by huge corporations into the democratic process. And that's the thing that worries me most about this. The way in which big tech is now a player in politics, that's bad for everyone.
Exactly, and that'll be bad forever and a day, no matter who wins the election. Thanks so much for joining us, Brendan.
Thanks, Chris.
Brendan O'Neill there, the editor of Spiked Online. Now, I haven't got time to share with you Johannes' Leaks cartoon for The Australian tomorrow. Buy the paper or subscribe online. It's another cracker.